Hello everyone, my name is Bryon Parman. I'm the Ag Finance Specialist in the Department of Ag Business and Applied Economics at North Dakota State University. And today I'm going to talk a bit about the economics of backgrounding cattle for fall of 2025. This video is being recorded on November 10th with the prices and price forecasts current up to that point. Obviously things can change if this video is watched later, but really the concepts and everything else about it are legit no matter when that's actually watched. So we have three production categories. These are pretty generic, and I'm sure everybody's familiar with them. But if I use the word weaned calves, I typically mean 500 to 600 pounds, maybe 450 to 6 1/4. If I say they're backgrounded calves, or that process is done, that's going to be around 750 to 900 pounds. And then finished cattle would be 1,350 pounds plus. Right now, maybe upwards of 1,500 pounds. And then if I talk about the price gap between heifers and steers, it's typically between $15 to $20 a hundredweight. That's actually gone up just this fall, though, where because of the higher prices, percentage-wise, it's roughly the same, but the gap has grown to $30, $40, and $50 for feeder calves, the difference between heifers and steer prices. And these some of these what I'm going to show on the next few slides are a bit dated, but they are true nonetheless, and we kind of understand this, but just in general for folks who do not, the price per hundredweight on cattle typically decreases as the animal gets heavier and heavier. All right, so the overall value is higher because they weigh so much more typically, but the price per hundredweight declines as they get heavier, and this is just a typical price relationship. Obviously, the prices you'll see here on the left, we're way above that this fall, but what you would see, but percentage-wise, it makes sense. In other words, the slope of the line here, that in typically if a 550 to 600 pound steer weighed or was valued at $170 per hundredweight, you get down here to 850 pounds, and it's more like 145. Again, less value per pound, but a lot more pounds, so the overall value of the animal is much higher. This slide, I'm just wanting to show that you can make money whether feed prices are high or low, because what typically happens then, for instance, the price of corn, and I know this is older, but the relationship remains, although we are getting to $3.50 corn this fall, but when corn prices are low, what you see typically happen is there's a big difference, a much bigger difference between, say, 550 weight and 8 weight cattle. Why is that? Feed prices are cheap, and larger feedlots and feeders are willing to pay more for a weaned calf simply because feed prices are so cheap and they can put the weight on cheaply. When feed prices are high, when you look at the blue diamond line here, that relationship or gap between the price per hundredweight on 8 weights and 550 weights, it shrinks, mainly because feed prices are high. In other words, they can't pay as much for a feeder calf now because it's going to cost more to put every pound on, and as a result, feeder calf prices come down. What's that mean for somebody backgrounding? Well, if feed prices are high, you can make money in the fact that, or the price relationship changes to where you don't have to pay as much for the incoming calf, and it goes into the feed. And then, of course, like I said, the reverse is true. Feed prices are low, you're going to pay more for the incoming calf. So in other words, you can make similar margins regardless of what feed costs are doing if the relationship between the price of the incoming calf and the backgrounded or finished cow animal agrees, in other words. And then in a typical year, you're going to have this kind of relationship between finished cattle or fed cattle and feeder cattle. So what you see here is when feeder cattle prices, or fed cattle, I should say, when live cattle ready to go to slaughter, when those prices are high, there's a big gap between incoming calf prices per hundredweight and this finished cow. In other words, you're going to spend a lot of money, or feedlots are willing to spend a lot on an incoming calf because live cattle or finished cattle prices are so high, they want to buy them all up. When finished cattle or ready to go to slaughter cattle prices are low, then you can't pay as much for the incoming calf. and that price on the feeder calf side tends to fall. And that's how the price relationship typically works in a typical year. We're not really in a typical year right now, but I just want to show that that's the baseline. That's, historically how things have behaved. These are the production costs that we're going to use in our scenarios here. And you'll see it with the rations that are being put out, but the baselines for the costs, if you're kind of building this or you're looking at your own budgets versus the budgets that I'm going to be putting out for these different feed stocks, as well as yardage cost, interest, vet med cost, trucking, shrink, and death loss. But the one I kind of want to draw your attention to that's a bit newer is this marketing cost here. And part of what's built into this marketing cost are the fee that you're going to incur to take an animal at auction. All right, could be as much as $35 to, I've heard, as high as $50 a head, and then an LRP contract, which if you're doing backgrounding in an environment that is, again, that with prices this high, we're going to want to protect ourselves, because it wouldn't take a very big drop in calf prices for the lost amount and be substantial. So that's where this marketing fee, this $130 per head, now it could even be higher in some cases depending on the level of LRP that you buy. But I'm just taking it as around $80 to $100 if you want to look at it that way for the LRP, and then anywhere between $30, $40 per head for your auction price. So in this presentation, I'm going to cover basically 7 different scenarios: a low rate of gain steer scenario, a higher rate of gain steer scenario, and then a basically wean to finish steer scenario. Then 3 heifer scenarios: a low rate of gain for your smaller, later born heifers that 450 to 750, a more typical moderate rate of gain scenario for your heifers, 525 up to 8 weights, and then basically taking one of these backgrounded heifers, 8 weights up to finish at 1,400 pounds. Then a final special edition, just because of the way things are this fall, a scenario where we're going to take slaughter cows that we're culling. They maybe are a bit thin because they've been nursing all summer long, and putting a couple of 100 pounds on them and then selling them as slaughter cattle or cull cows, and see what that looks like. So we're going to start with the steer. We're going to run through the steer scenarios first, then we'll do the heifer scenarios, and then we'll move on to the cull cow scenario of putting weight on cull cows. These are the prices I'm going to be using for the incoming calves, as well as the slaughter cow scenario. The steers are all starting at roughly the same weight, so I'm using $436 per hundredweight. That was the prices. Cash prices in North Dakota right now are kind of all over the map. Just from recent auction sales, you can see prices anywhere from $360 up to $450 per hundredweight. I'm kind of taking the midpoint here and seeing what that looks like. Obviously, if you have an incoming price well below this, things are going to look better. If you're up in that $450 range, if you could have sold them for that, it's going to look worse. But this is kind of what the average was as of last week. And then on the heifer side, same thing. I'm taking these are the averages. You may see auction prices that are much higher than this for feeder heifers, and you may see prices that are lower. This is again an average. And then slaughter cow prices for a very lean 900 to 1,200 pound slaughter cow. And then these are the expected futures prices. Okay, so go out and look at when these specific animals are supposed to be sold, what the price is going to be then, and bring it back to today as our expected price. Again, it's likely that these prices will move, I mean, almost a certainty to some degree and in some direction, one way or the other, hence the reason for that LRP. But as of the creation of this, these were the prices. Like 7 to 8 weight steers were $365 a hundredweight, 8 to 9 weights down to $345, and then your heifer prices basically the same, $335 for 6 to 7 weights and 7 to 8 weights, and then your 8 to 9 100 pound heifers down to $310, and then your Cull cow prices, if they come out with a higher fat percentage up to like 1,400 pounds or so, this is actually conservative. This could be closer to $150 a hundredweight, depending on what your assumption is on what they'll bring later on. But certainly they should be able to bring 135. And then your live cattle price for summer 2026, if you were going to finish a steer, this is the futures price during that time. This is the first scenario. This is our 575 to 8 weight steer scenario with an average daily gain of 1.7 pounds a day. These are the rations that are put forth, and these rations are created and feeding scenario by Carl Hoppe at the Carrington Research and Extension Center. And I take the prices and plug them into the budget, or the costs, and plug them into the budget, as well as the daily rate of gain. But you can just see it here: grass, hay, silage, DDGs, and some salts. And it comes out to 92 cents per day. This is our first scenario. This is the low rate of gain scenario, starting at 575 and up to 800 pounds. At 1.7 pounds a day, that puts this steer on feed for 132 days to achieve that. You see our projected selling price. This was shown on the one of the previous slides for the futures prices for those. And then our beginning value. Our shrink, there's our feed cost, 92 cents a day, almost comes out to almost $122 total. And then we have our marketing fee. In this case, I'm saying an $80 LRP, okay, and then about $50 perhaps of an auction fee. Maybe it's $40 and a $90 LRP. Either way, it come to $130. And this scenario shows a loss of $47.18 per head. A big reason for that, for one, they're in the yard for a very long time, 132 days, to only put on, 225 pounds. So that's a long time for not putting on a lot of weight. So you're getting kind of killed by yardage here, for one thing. And then your feed costs, yeah, it's only 92 cents a day because it's such a low rate of gain, but that feed cost is $122 because they're in the lot for such a long time and not putting on weight very fast. Your feed cost per day adds up pretty quickly. And so that's part of the bigger reason. And when I've been doing these scenarios for several years now, and this is typically not a very big money maker, if it makes any at all. And that's the reason is because of that time factor that they spend so much time in the yard. Here's our second steer scenario. This is 575 up to 855 pounds. Okay. Now, obviously, this is going to cost a bit more because our rate of gain is now 2.8 pounds average daily gain. So 1.1 pounds a day even more than the previous scenario. And as you would expect, our feed costs per day are a bit higher, but not as much as you'd think, given the fact that we're gaining so much faster than the previous scenario. So we've got grass, legume hay, silage, corn, DDGs, and salts again. And then again, this cost per day is $1.15. Again, using our backgrounding budget, this is that steer scenario I just mentioned. We're going from 575 to 855 at 2.8 pounds a day. Beginning value 436, just like the previous scenario. Our projected selling price a little bit lower because we're, instead of going to 800 pounds, we're going to 855. But what do you notice? This one actually shows a bit of a profit, and the main reason being this animal's on feed for only 100 days, in unlike the last scenario, which was way over 100, and our feed costs are $115, right, total. $1.15 per day times 100 days is $115. So our feed costs, even though this animal is gaining more weight, our total feed cost is so much lower because they spend so much less time in the feedlot, or in the operation getting fed. And you look at our lot cost, it's $40 instead of, like the last scenario, closer to $60. And that's really explaining a lot of it. So that this still has that LRP marketing fee and our auction fee, but you can see that this one actually shows a slight profit, and that's the biggest reason, is you're not getting your profits aren't getting eaten up by your lot costs, and then the animal not gaining enough weight fast enough to offset your feed cost per day. So that's really the explanation here. And again, if you can bring that beginning value down a bit, so you're looking at feeder calf prices, and instead of 436, you can get it down to, I don't know, $400 or something like that, then this starts to look a lot better, provided that you can still get that projected selling price of $345 per hundredweight. And this just goes back to what I said. This is just putting them side by side, the 2.8 pounds average daily gain versus the 1.7 pound average daily gain scenario. You look at the two scenarios. The total sales value of the 8 weight is $29.20. The total sales value of the 855 weight is $29.49. So there's almost $30 difference there in profit. The yardage costs are cheaper on the 2.8 pounder, and the total feed cost is actually lower, if you can believe that. So as a result, that's what we're showing. And I show this scenario and side by side every year, basically to just say that, look, under just about any circumstance, the faster rate of gain, the more aggressive ration is the more profitable scenario, especially when feed costs are so cheap. This is the final steer scenario, and this is taking a 575 or a weaned calf, 575 weight, all the way up to finish, 1,500 pounds at a ration that allows for a 3.8 pounds average daily gain through the life of it. And then that feed cost total, you got some more items in here, comes up to $2.29 per day in this scenario. This is the budget, again using the backgrounding budget, taking this 575 weight up to 1,500 pounds at 3.8 pounds a day would take 243 days. And again, that beginning value is 436. If you can get it down a bit, that would make a difference. This was the futures price for live cattle out 243 days in the future, and it comes in at a loss of $310 per head. The biggest reason that this has happened was that the live cattle prices had went down pretty sharply somewhat recently, and that just ate away at the profitability of this particular scenario. And I went ahead and looked what it would take to actually make this. If you bring the animal in, the steer in at $436 a hundredweight, and everything else stays the same, what would you have to get per hundredweight for your live cattle price in order to break even? And that would be $235 instead of $215. So these prices need to go up over 10% in order to make this profitable, because right now it isn't. Unless, now the other side to that is, if the beginning value is substantially less, you get this down to, say, in $365 beginning value instead of $436, then that changes the math quite a bit. But the prices as it were when this scenario was created and what the feeder cattle price was, it'd just be really tough under this situation to actually turn a profit going all the way to finish, and that's primarily because of lower live cattle prices relative to feeder calf prices. We're going to switch over now and do our 3 heifer feeding scenarios, followed at the end by that cull cow scenario I mentioned before. Here's the first heifer scenario. This is taking those maybe late born or smaller heifers, 450 pounds up to 756, at an average daily gain of 1.7 pounds. This is the ration, similar to the other scenarios, a bit different, and this is going to cost you 88 cents per day. In this scenario, you see the profit. Okay, so the beginning value, and this comes from, again, that feeder calf prices in North Dakota, $424 coming in. Projected selling price at 750 weight of 335, came in at 450 pounds, leaving at 750, 176 days on feed, 1.7 pound average daily gain. We have our same marketing fee of $130. All right, and similar to the steer scenario. And what you see is this turning a profit of $85.60 per head. The biggest reason is because, first of all, coming in at $424 instead of like 436, like the steer scenarios. That makes a very big difference. And then this projected sales price of heifers, remember I talked about that price slide gap closing heifers versus steers. As they get heavier, the price difference between heifers and steers gets closer and closer and closer to where at live weights, slaughter prices, it's almost, it's very, very small, if any. And so that price slide gap closure essentially accounts for this 85.60. Even though this heifer was in the lot for a long time in this scenario, 176 days, our feed costs are $162, which would be the highest one that we've looked at so far, just because of the time in there. But and our yardage is very high. Even still, this one's turning a profit, and it's mainly because of that price slide gap closing. This is our more aggressive ration scenario for our heifers. This is going from 5 1/4 to 805, probably a more typical scenario that you may run into. As you would expect, the feed cost in this case is a bit higher than the one previous, but we're gaining 2.8 pounds instead of 1.7, and we're going all the way up to 805 in this case. So here's the ration shown here: grass, silage, corn, DDGs, some salt and limestone. This is our backgrounding budget for our more aggressive ration heifer scenario, going from 5 1/4 to 805, because this heifer, even though instead of being 750 is going all the way up to 805, this animal's in the lot only for 100 days instead of over 170 like the previous scenario, and we're going up to 805. The beginning value 413, and then that projected selling price of 335 because it's similar. The feed cost is higher, but per day, but the feed cost in total is much lower at $113, and then our yardage cost, the lot cost, is $40. 40 cents per day times 100 days. Still got that marketing fee, still got that cost there with the LRP and the feedlot, or not the feedlot, but the auction house, whatever they would charge for it. But you see, this more aggressive scenario, we're netting $114 per head, and that's pretty good. And again, part of it's closing that price slide gap, or a lot of it is, but in this case, because the ration is more aggressive, less time in the yard, our feed costs wind up going down substantially, and as does our yardage fee, and as a result, we're turning an even better profit in this heifer scenario than we did in the previous one. This is our final heifer scenario. This is taking one of those 8-weight heifers that you backgrounded all the way out to 1,400 pounds, or you could say you're bringing in some 8-weights and taking them to finish, however you want to think about it, whether it's your own homegrown or some new ones coming in that you would be doing this with, taking them from 800 pounds to 1,400 at 3.4 pounds a day, and then that feed cost per day is $1.64. And as you would expect, much like the finishing steer scenario, this scenario shows a significant loss, $336 per head. The main reason being, again, those live cattle prices, $215 per hundredweight versus the beginning value on this 8-weight heifer of $335. So I'm using the beginning value of what an 8-weight is, not that feeder calf price, because we're going from 800 pounds up to 1,400. That'd be 171 days on feed at 3.5 pounds a day. And it's just the fact that these live cattle prices are just too low. You'd have to actually take these live cattle prices up to 240 pounds in this case for that to actually break even, which may be an indication in this case that folks are holding back heifers, or there's demand for them for some herd expansion. That may be the case, maybe not, but that's what it's showing here, is that this scenario is there's just an imbalance or too big a gap between 8-weight heifers versus finished cattle or live cattle prices, and as a result it shows a significant loss of $336 per head. Our final scenario is that fattening cull cow scenario, where one's just weaned a calf, kind of skinny. You could obviously sell immediately as a cull cow, but in this case we wanted to look at what would happen. What does it look like if you bring a 1,250 pound cow in and put a couple of 100 pounds on her over the next couple of months or so, and then turn around and sell as a cull cow? Would there be any money to be made in that case? And you're going to see here real soon that there is, even with the the feed cost of being $2.30 approximately per day at 3.4 pounds a day. And I use the backgrounding budget to show this. Similarly, the cows coming in at 1,200 pounds in this case, you're putting on 200 pounds in the lot for approximately 60 days, just a little bit less than 60 days. But what you notice here, that's the really thin or really lean cull cow price as of the time of this was around 116 per hundredweight, maybe 120, and the fatter, those animals having a higher body fat percentage actually selling for more. So in this cull cow scenario, you're actually making money on the pounds that you already had on the animal, as well as the pounds that you're putting on, because the value is actually increasing. This isn't always the case necessarily, but it is this year that that the economics of this actually works. And this is fairly conservative of $123 profit. There's other instances where you may get up to $150 per hundredweight there, which would make this look even better. Adding another $15 per hundredweight on top of that, you could be talking closer to $250, $300 per head total net profit. It just really depends on what you're going to get for that final cull cow price. But nonetheless, this actually there's a circumstance going on right now where this makes a lot of financial and economic sense to do. But again, you got to have that LRP though. You don't necessarily want to bring in a cull cow and go the opposite direction. But this so far looks like a fairly safe way to make a little bit of extra money this fall is holding on to your cull cows for a couple of extra months and really pouring the feed to them, putting on a couple of 100 pounds, and then selling them as cull cows. Finally, this is just all the scenarios, the 7 scenarios we went over. And you notice, the only steer scenario that actually shows a profit in this case is this 575 to 855 at a 2.8 pounds per day. Again, that beginning value makes a huge difference in these steer scenarios. If you can get that cost down, in other words, if prices when you bring them in are lower, then you can maybe make that look a little bit better, but it's for the most part kind of a break-even proposition, and this tends to be true in large part most years. It's just that value on feeder steers is always just so high that it's really marginal how much there is your ability to make money there. The finishing steers as well as the finishing heifer scenario, it's just those live cattle prices so low compared to backgrounded cattle and feeder cattle. It would be tough to make this work and pencil out given where live cattle prices are. As usual though, the backgrounding heifer scenarios show a substantial profit. They do most years that I do this, and again, a lot of that is just the built-in advantage of heifers having the ability to close the price slide gap. In other words, the feeder calf price of heifers just tends to be lower than steers. That gap closes as they get heavier and older, and that right there gives them that built-in advantage over steers in a lot of cases. And then finally, our cull cow finishing or fattening program or scenario that we ran, it looks really good, and I do think my $123 per head is conservative and might be pretty low compared to what you can actually get doing it. I didn't want to do it and show some huge profit and then it not come to pass, but it's a fairly safe bet that this year that's going to work out if you bring them in there and put a couple of 100 pounds on over the next couple of months. All right, well, I want to thank everyone for watching. I hope you got something out of this. I hope that it helps you with some of your decision making on backgrounding this year, steers, heifers, maybe something you hadn't thought about on putting some weight back on your cull cows, those kind of things. If you have any questions, the best way to contact me is the email you see on this slide right here. I try to respond as soon as I can. I'm on the road a good bit in the wintertime, but when I get your email and I have a chance to read it, I try to turn it around pretty fast. So thanks again. Appreciate you watching, and hope you have a safe and profitable season.